So you're thinking about selling your home and you are thinking, oh boy, this is going to be expensive. And I'm not here to sugarcoat it. It is actually quite expensive to sell a home, especially in California and especially in Santa Cruz, where the median sales price is running at about $1.3 million. But here's the truth. For sale by owners, and yes, this is a message coming from a realtor, and yes, if you want to sell your home on your own, I will link a video of the description on how you can actually do that. But today I want to go over for sale by owner versus a realtor. Is saving money and selling your home on your own actually really saving you money? Let's dive in and take a look about the truth regarding for sale by owner versus a real estate agent. But what if I told you that for most people, going for sale by owner or FSBO is a financial trap? What if trying to save that commission or compensation, as we call it these days, is the very thing that could make you leave tens of thousands of dollars on the table? I'm Shamika Fox, and I've been in the real estate trenches for over 20 years now, believe it or not, helping hundreds of families with their biggest financial decision. I've seen the wins, but I've also seen disasters, and the numbers don't lie. So today we're pulling back the curtain on the whole for sale by owner fantasy and the idea of actually saving money because you're saving on the real estate commission. We will expose the 5 hidden costs that are barely talked about and look at the data that shows how trying to save a few percentage points, which ask your tax advisor, but your closing costs should be tax deductible. So if you save a little bit of money on the commission or compensation, you're going to actually end up paying in taxes potentially. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a tax advisor or CPA, so make sure that you do run those numbers and talk to your CPA about it. So stick around because you're going to want to see the number one mistake that costs for sale by owners thousands of dollars, and also real case studies based on real sellers who started as for sale by owners and ended up selling with a realtor, what their time on market was, what their final sales price was. Stick around till the end because I'm going to go over the actual numbers. Also, very interesting, I was just watching Dave Ramsey and a caller called in and asked him, should he sell his home for sale by owner? And Dave Ramsey, who is a financial guru who has helped millions of people get out of debt, writes books on financial freedom and security, actually owns real estate companies, said, I would never pull my teeth. I go to a dentist to get professional help. And if I'm going to sell my home, selling it for sale by owner is not an option. He also mentions, and I thought that this was a really critical point, that you don't just want to hire anybody because you are going to end up paying that realtor tens of thousands of dollars to help you sell your home. So make sure you interview at least 3 agents. I have a video on the questions you should ask realtors when you are interviewing a realtor to sell your home. I will link that in the description as well. But Dave Ramsey actually promotes hiring realtors to help sell homes because he says that if you try to do it on your own, you actually end up losing money. And I don't know about you, I've said this before, I don't like to lose money. So the first thing that you need to consider as a for sale by owner is the pricing strategy. A lot of sellers, and this was very interesting on the Dave Ramsey show, the seller who called in said that he had consulted with the realtor who helped him buy his home, and the realtor suggested that the price value was around $300,000, but he wanted to put it on the market for, I think he said $350,000. So I don't know if it is because they have an emotional attachment to the property or they want to or need to get a certain dollar amount out. But the truth of the matter is when you are pricing your home, you have to look at market data, statistics, and details of what your market is doing. The actual final sales price will simply be what the market will bear at that given time. If you start out too high, and I've seen this and it's a disaster so many times when sellers start with their property too high because they need to get a certain amount out, or they've invested so much money in the property, or they have so much emotional attachment to that property that they end up chasing the market down and selling for a lot less than they would have if they priced their property aggressively to start and appealed to the masses, which will, generally speaking, especially in my market in Santa Cruz, attract multiple offers, and multiple offers is the best way to actually get the highest dollar amount with the best terms. The second mistake that I see often with for sale by owners is, again, underpricing strategy, and it's underpricing. Now, I always say when I meet with a seller that we can never underprice a property. As long as it is marketed appropriately, we will be seen by as many buyers who could possibly be interested in that specific property. You'll end up with multiple offers, and that price will be driven up to the actual current market value. But underpricing a property as a for sale by owner is a really tricky problem because your home is not being seen by the masses. It might be seen because somebody drives by and sees the sign in your yard. It may be seen because you have some photos and your listing description on your social media, which is reaching only the people that you already know. You might put your home on Craigslist and you might put your home on Facebook Marketplace, but you're not syndicating with all the real estate sites by doing this. Now, one thing that you can do if you want to go the route of for sale by owner, and again, I'm not trying to convince you to go one way or another. I'm just giving you the information so you can make the best decision. But if you do want to go for sale by owner, there are flat rate real estate companies that you can pay an upfront flat fee, and they will do anything from add your home to the MLS, put a lockbox on the front door, put a sign in the yard potentially, but you're going to be the one that's in charge as for sale by owner for making the appointments with the potential buyers, with vetting the potential buyers so that you're not wasting your time with looky-loos, with negotiating the contract, with filling out the disclosure forms to make sure that you don't end up in a legal liability or a lawsuit. If you are to underprice your property, you may get an offer at that price. You are not obligated to sell it at that price unless you've signed a residential purchase agreement agreeing to those terms. But if you underprice your property, you could be leaving more than the compensation or commission on the table with regards to your pricing strategy. The number 3 issue that I've seen with for sale by owners and their failure is the exposure gap or lack or inability to market the property effectively, which means that they are not exposing the property not only to the most people, but with a strategic marketing strategy to expose that property to the right people. Meaning, if you are selling a multi-residential property, you're going to want to have a strategy that attracts investors. Or if you are selling a horse ranch, you're going to want to have a marketing strategy that exposes your property to people who own horses or have a horse business, right? The exposure gap is a real thing. If a buyer can't find you, then they can't buy your home. Here's the deal though. The overwhelming majority of serious pre-approved buyers are working with agents. So even if you end up saving money on the listing side of the compensation, generally a buyer will come to your door with an agent, and that buyer will most likely want their agent to negotiate their compensation be paid by a seller. This year, I actually did represent a buyer in a for sale by owner transaction, and it actually went quite smoothly considering I've had other disasters where I've represented buyers in for sale by owner transactions, and we get to the closing table and the seller hasn't provided all of the disclosures that are needed or required in the state of California. So then we get a new disclosure item 3 days before we're supposed to close escrow. And I've talked about this before, but when you get a new disclosure item from a seller, then that starts a 3-day right of rescission. Luckily for us, the issue wasn't huge and the buyer decided to proceed and close escrow. But if it was a real detrimental issue, then the buyer could have either canceled escrow or they could have requested a credit or requested that the purchase price be reduced based on that new information. But the deal that I did this summer with a for sale by owner actually ended up great. But what I will tell you is that it was like a time delay. We submitted the offer. The offer had a deadline. The deadline was passed because the seller wanted to have an attorney review the purchase contract, which I think is actually a great idea. Before you sign a contract, make sure you understand it. So he ended up spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on advice from an attorney, which is great. Good for him. Glad he did it. But our offer expired, so we had to redraft the offer. And finally, we were able to get our contract signed, get into escrow, and start the escrow process. But what I did notice, and it was a pretty nice love fest if I'm honest with you, what I did notice is that along the way there were so many questions that he had that he would call and ask me, and I am representing the buyers. I do not have agency with the seller. I wasn't able to answer those questions for him. So I don't know if he ended up doing a Google search or asking a friend or calling the attorney that he had originally solicited to help him go over the contract. But there are a lot of nuances that happen during a real estate contract that a seller will want to understand so that they can be prepared and that they can actually sell their property and get to the closing table and close the escrow. So I would say that that purchase ended up being amazingly smooth, except that we did have a lot of timing issues and questions that came up on the seller side that I just simply couldn't answer because I wasn't representing him. So let's look at some data quickly. The data here is pretty clear. For sale by owner deals have fallen to a historic low, making up only 6% of home sales in 2024. If for sale by owner was such a great deal, that number would be climbing, not collapsing. There's a reason over 90% of sellers use an agent. They know that maximum exposure leads to maximum price, and trying to save a few percent on commission or compensation is useless if you're not even reaching the people willing to pay top dollar for your property. And a buyer who is considering purchasing a for sale by owner will expect to get a better deal on that purchase. So the money you think you're saving, you're going to end up selling for less, which means that ultimately you're not saving money anyways. And the whole reason that you wanted to go for sale by owner was to make the most money you could on the sale of your largest asset. The National Association of Realtors and industry-based summaries show for sale by owner homes selling around a median of 360,000 to 380,000 in 2025 versus properties that sold with the representation of a real estate agent. Those sales prices came in between 450,000 to 465,000, which is about a 13 to 18% increase over what the for sale by owners were able to achieve on the sale of their home. So as you can see, even if you're paying a full 6% on the buy side, 3%, and on the sale side, 3% as a seller, you're still actually losing money. And generally speaking, as I mentioned before, a buyer will want their buyer's agent to negotiate that the seller pays the buyer agent compensation. In this next section, we're going to talk about the negotiation disadvantage, a pro versus an amateur. So let's imagine you get the pricing right. You get decent traffic because you've priced it well and you've done what I said, which is put it on Zillow, put it on the MLS, put it on Marketplace, have a sign in your yard, and done some social media marketing, as well as reached out to your entire network of people. So you have eyes on your property. You get the price right. Your traffic is coming in. This is where the hidden cost, number 3, can wipe out every cent you thought you were saving. I'm talking about the negotiation disadvantage. Listen, I'm not a football player. I don't play for the NFL. I'm not going to want to go on the field and try to get a touchdown against people who practice and play every day for a living. They are trained and they are skilled in an area that I am not. So when you sell your home, it's you, an emotional amateur versus a buyer who is very often represented by a professional, battle-hardened negotiator. And hopefully they have a lot of experience and they are very well trained. Again, I told you, interview 3 people to represent you in the sale of your home if you choose not to go for sale by owner. Make sure that they are trained and skilled in the negotiations. This is where a lot of things get left on the table. The agent has one job: get their client the best possible deal. They're representing the buyer. They do this for a living. They know the tricks, the contract clause, and the psychology to get their buyer a lower price. You, on the other hand, might do this once in a decade. This is your largest investment. Don't leave money on the table. So this is a complete mismatch. Even worse, you're emotionally invested. So you might just make a deal to make a deal and be done because it has been a stressful and time-consuming second job that you've you've had to take on because you didn't want to hire a realtor. When a lowball offer rolls in, it feels like a personal insult. You don't even want to respond. And I've talked about this in my other videos in the past. Please always respond with a counteroffer. If the offer is not what you expect or what you want, then respond with a counteroffer so that you can have a dialogue with the buyer and come to terms that are agreeable to both parties. But it's incredibly hard to stay objective and make a smart decision. Buyer's agents know this and they will use it against you in their negotiation tactics and strategy. They'll pick your house apart after the inspection and hit you with a long, scary list of demands. A good agent acts as a buffer, a detached pro who can handle these tactics without emotion and knows what's a reasonable request versus a negotiation ploy. The numbers here are undeniable. According to the National Association of Realtors 2024 data, the typical for sale by owner home sold for a median price of around $380,000, while the median for agent-assisted homes was sold for $435,000. Now, let's be fair. That staggering $55,000 difference isn't all because of negotiation. For sale by owner sales often include properties sold to family and friends, so maybe somebody's getting a better deal, maybe no negotiation was needed. But even if you account for that, a massive gap remains. Many buyers look specifically for FSBOs or for sale by owners so that they can get a good deal. The negotiation table is usually where FSBO's dreams go to die.
Chicken Little! What is it? What's going on?
The sky is falling! The sky is falling!
Again, I'm not trying to scare you. I do have a video that will tell you how to do a for sale by owner. And if you want to call me, I will walk you through the entire process. I am more than happy to be a resource for you if this is what you want to do. I just want to share with you that for sale by owners, according to the data of the National Association of Realtors, do not generally make up the difference that you save on the commission or compensation that is paid to a listing agent. Okay, the next section that we're going to talk about is the time hassle, the inconvenience of this so-called second job that you have all of a sudden decided that you wanted to do or that you're going to do because you're going to save yourself some money. First of all, it is a huge time suck. If you are hiring a professional real estate agent to sell your home, that should be their only job. That is their career. They dedicate their time, their money, and their resources to being the best in their field, and you should hire somebody who is. So with that said, the fourth hidden cost won't show up on a closing statement, but it's very real, the insane amount of time that is involved in selling a home. People who sell their homes dramatically underestimate the work and the stress that's required to manage what is going on with regards to marketing, with regards to showing your property, with regards to the disclosures. It is absolutely insane. This is not a weekend project. It is a full-time job. And for you, it will be unpaid because this is not what you do for your profession, unless you're able to sell your home for the price that a real estate agent would be able to sell your home, but you don't use a real estate agent. Then it's worth it. Just think about it. What an agent does, they coordinate photos, they coordinate videos, they write ad copy, they field dozens of phone calls, text messages, emails. They talk to nosy neighbors. Every single time I put a house on the market, a neighbor calls. And it's usually, sometimes it's a nice, pleasant call that says, "Nice to meet you. I'm so glad you're selling the home." Usually, though, it's, "Hey, I want to get the fence fixed. Can you make sure that that happens before we close the escrow?" Or, "Hey, did you know about the pipe that burst in the backyard and make sure they disclose it?" Or, "The fence encroaches on our property." It's usually things that actually need a bit of strategy to mitigate any issues that might otherwise not be realized until after the close of escrow, which then you end up in a lawsuit, and that's not what we want to do here. So be prepared to spend a ton of time selling your home if you decide to go for sale by owner. Showings, marketing, disclosures, phone calls, text messages, pre-qualifying buyers, etc., etc. And then also there is something in the real estate industry where some agents will go after for sale by owners specifically to try and get the listing. So you'll not only be fielding calls from potential buyers and the potential buyers' agents, but agents who actually want to list your home for sale. And they'll probably say something like, "Hey, this is Shamika Fox. I have a buyer for your home. Can I come and look at it?" When in actuality, they don't have a buyer for your home. And I don't like this tactic. I think it's unethical. I've never done it. But that said, you could be wasting your time showing it to an agent who really their intention is to list the home for you. Okay, so let's move on. The other thing I wanted to talk about with regards to your time spent in showing your property is that you are going to want to be home for all of the showings because you are not going to know who those buyers are. You are not going to have familiarity with all the realtors that are in your neighborhood. You're going to want to be there for the showings because of safety concerns and issues that could arise. You don't want somebody to steal something that's been left out. You don't want somebody to get injured on your property and have some insurance claim. But the thing about you as the seller being home during a showing, and I've seen this hundreds of times, is it makes the buyer very uneasy. They're unable to actually look at the property with a critical eye and decide whether or not they like the property. I've actually had buyers walk in, see the seller there. The seller introduces themselves, starts talking about all the things about the property, of course, that they love, trying to upsell the property, and my clients look at me and they're like, we want to go. They were not comfortable looking at the property with the sellers there. So besides this being a huge time suck, you're going to have to be at every showing because safety concerns and issues, and it's going to turn off a majority of buyers who are looking to purchase your home. And number 5, and possibly the potential for the most costly mistake, is the legal and closing risk, which in my consideration is the scariest of all of the risks that you take on as a for sale by owner. The massive legal risk you take on when you sell without a pro is a real deal. It's a binding legal contract packed with complex documents and deadlines. One missed detail or unchecked box or one forgotten disclosure can land you in a lawsuit that costs more than the house itself. In most states, you're legally required to disclose any known material, facts, or defects with regards to the property. And we've talked about this before, but in California, the disclosures are about this thick. And I do go over how to properly answer the questions with my sellers to make sure that we don't end up in a lawsuit. That's the last thing we want to do. We want to sell the home to a buyer. We want them to love what they purchased, and we want to make sure that we appropriately disclose every known material fact up front so that we don't get to the closing table and all of a sudden a new disclosure item comes up, giving the buyer a 3-day right of rescission. I've talked about that before. Okay, I'm yelling because I'm passionate about this subject. It's not because I'm being aggressive. Jason, that's for you. A lot of buyers think because they've fixed an issue, they don't have to disclose the issue. That's not the case. If you have had a leak, if you have had mold, if you have had water intrusion, you need to disclose that there was an issue and that you have mitigated the issue. And if you have the invoices, the paid invoices for the work that was completed, that's even better. So include those in your disclosure packet. Failing to disclose properly is one of the top reasons sellers get sued after the sale. An agent knows exactly what your state requires and gives you the right forms to shield you from this liability. The purchase agreement itself is a legal minefield. It sets deadlines for inspection, financing, appraisals, and the closing. A buyer's agent will write the contract to give their client every advantage. In Santa Cruz, we have the Q5 and Q6 section, which talks about government required inspections and government required retrofits. In Santa Cruz, we have 3 currently that are in place for a point of sale ordinance. 1 is the well inspection, 2 is a septic inspection, and 3 is the sewer lateral inspection. All of those things, if they are not dealt with properly, have a hefty price tag if they fail or they don't work. The cost of a sewer lateral replacement could be anywhere from $10,000 or more. So just know, if you say, yes, I'm going to take care of Q5 and Q6 in Santa Cruz, you could potentially be committing yourself to a $10,000 project or more. Septics, if you need to replace the septic and the leach line, we're talking $35,000 or more. So relying on a generic online contract, a buyer's agent will write the contract to give their client every advantage. They'll probably ask the seller to cover Q5 and Q6. Without your own professional to review and push back on those terms, you could be agreeing to things you don't even understand, like I just mentioned. So relying on a generic online contract is a classic for sale by owner mistake that could cost you tens of thousands of dollars at the closing table. So now you've just lost out on the compensation or commission that you've saved, right? Doesn't make sense. So here in conclusion, let's go back to the original idea of selling your house yourself to save on commission or compensation, which today the average compensation that is paid out of the seller's net proceeds is at 5.575%. This is always negotiable, so it's not a fixed rate, but today the average compensation paid is at 5.57%. So first, the strategic blunder of mispricing your home, either too high or too low. Second is the exposure gap, not getting it to the right people and not getting it to the masses when you're marketing your property. Third is the negotiation disadvantage and just simply not understanding some of the terms that you might be agreeing to when you're signing a residential purchase agreement. And fourth is the huge personal cost of your time. So what is your time worth, and is it worth not hiring somebody to represent you in the sale of your largest asset? And fifth is the terrifying legal risks that could come back to haunt you if you do not fill out or do the disclosures correctly. So the truth about the real estate commission or compensation is that it's just a fee. It's the price for a professional expertise. Like I said in the beginning, you're not going to pull your own teeth out. You're going to go to the dentist. You're not going to give yourself heart surgery. You're going to go to a heart specialist or surgeon. So when you are working to sell your largest asset, I would suggest that you hire a professional. I know I'm going to get a lot of grief in this, that there's going to be mean comments about how it's just a plug or a commercial for my own real estate business, and that's totally fine. I just want to get it out there to the people who are listening and who care about saving themselves the legal headache, the time headache, the financial headache of not having proper representation. So the truth about the real estate commission is that it's not just a fee. It's the price for professional expertise, marketing power, negotiation skills, project management, and legal protection. The data consistently shows that most sellers trying to save a few percent on commission or compensation often result in a significantly lower net profit in the end. So here's a couple of failed for sale by owner examples that I've seen in Santa Cruz. Example number one is a for sale by owner listed their home for $1,180,000. It sat on the market for 60 days with multiple price drops, and it still remained unsold. They ended up relisting their property with a realtor, and the realtor went in and they helped them prepare the home. They gave it curb appeal. They gave it a beautiful aesthetic with staging and preparation. They took beautiful photos and videos. They marketed extensively, and then the property ended up receiving multiple offers within the first 2 weeks and selling for $1,275,000, which is $95,000 more than the for sale by owner even had it listed for. The truth is in the numbers. Math doesn't lie. I don't know what else to tell you. The net proceeds are generally going to be higher when you have a realtor that's representing you and that can cast a wide mouth net in the sea to catch multiple fishes versus you and your one little fishing pole. I think that's it. I've put my point across. If you still feel compelled to do for sale by owner, I'm going to link a video in the description on how best to do it, but do please feel free to call me. I would be happy to be a resource and help you and get on that path to get your home sold as for sale by owner. Some sellers just absolutely love the prospect and the idea of doing it on their own, and I have no problem with that. So call me if you have any questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Shamika Fox, your Santa Cruz real estate expert. If you'd like to buy or sell with an agent in the Santa Cruz area, I would love to be a realtor of your choice. And if you'd like to buy or sell out of the area, fill out the form that's pinned to the top of the comments below, and I will connect you with a wonderful agent in your area. Thank you again, and make it a great day.